Hey everybody, welcome to the first You Rock conference online. I'm super excited to be here, and I really want to thank Danny Rocker for inviting me to do this today. It's an honor to talk to everybody about what we do. I really love my job, and I am constantly trying to find ways to teach other people how to do their job really well. I started my business in 2009. After I had my kids, I just started photographing them like crazy, and then a friend of mine asked me to photograph their wedding, and before you knew it, I'm a wedding photographer now. I had a lot to learn. I never mentored with anyone, and I think that I really just want to share some advice with everyone so that they can kind of skip a couple of the most embarrassing things I've ever done or the wrong ways to do things. One of the major things about wedding photography that I found really difficult in the beginning was coming up with ways to bond with the client and find ways to make really real, authentic, and creative images all at the same time. I started photographing when I was about 12, when my grandfather gave me his Minolta camera. And I grew up on a really huge farm out in the middle of nowhere, so I had no neighborhood, hence no friends, only siblings, old people, and my parents. So I kind of learned how to just run around and be creative, and that was sort of like the launching point of pretty much my entire life and my love for photography and finding light and just finding ways to tell stories. I've always been a really emotional and empathetic person. I think that helps me out with my job a lot, and I'm able to relate to people. And so when I talk with you today, I'm going to tell you a few of the things that I do when I go to a wedding and beforehand and leading up to, and actually the follow-up as well, so that you can get more of an idea of how you can get the same kind of images that we get from our weddings. It didn't happen overnight. Obviously, this is like something that has taken a long time for me to feel really comfortable with. And to be honest, I think I only just started feeling comfortable about 3 years ago. So hoping to help a few people out there that have some questions or maybe are scared or get nervous or anxious before weddings. So I put together a guide to help you with a couple of steps that I use and techniques I use throughout the day. In this guide, we're going to cover connecting with the bride and groom and building trust with them. You want everything to be authentic, even if it's a portrait, even if it's posed. You want it to come off as authentic and real and emotional as possible. The first is going to be building trust with your client. The second is going to be making smart decisions in the moment. I will also talk about taking all that knowledge, technical knowledge, and applying it to all of the other things that we're talking about. We're going to talk about problem solving and heading them off before they happen. And a lot of that has to do with communication. I'm going to give you a rundown step by step what I do through the day, and also show you some images throughout this video so that you can kind of see like where my head is at as I'm taking those photos. So the first step to wedding photography for me is always the connection between the couple and us. So before I ever even walk into the room the day of the wedding, I've already got loads of information that they've given me. So we send out questionnaires that are detailed, that ask about family dynamics, that ask about anything that might kind of hinder our day or help our day. They tell us about, family members that maybe passed away, or if someone was sick and it's really important to them to incorporate them into a lot of the photos. They usually give us a heads up on what's going on. It's fine if you don't want to do that, if you just want to go in and do the candid thing, but I will tell you that knowing all of this stuff beforehand going in is like gold. To me, that is always the first step, is finding out as much as I can about them, getting to know them, and building a relationship with them. So obviously, I would recommend taking them out on an engagement shoot. You're going to learn so much about them, not just as far as photographing them, but also just about who they are, what they like, their idiosyncrasies, their humor, and all of that is going to play into the wedding day and how you react to them, how they react to you. And then also, once they get the engagement photos, they're going to go, okay, great, we totally trust this person, and they're going to be so much more willing to do whatever you want on the wedding day, and also just be themselves. Another way of connecting would be to build a timeline that is very detailed, that when you go into the wedding day, there's no surprises for anyone. I find that the schedule, it doesn't really get looked at that much the day of, but it it gets everybody's head in line, so everybody is just really relaxed, because we know we worked it out. We worked out all the times. We worked everything out with a little bit of a buffer time, so that there's never going to be a moment where we go, oh my God, we're like an hour behind and we totally forgot to put in family photos or something like that into the schedule. All of that is going to be done up front. I'm very, very realistic with my clients about how much time everything takes. So family photos, they take a really long time. If you know, you have 40 family photos, it's gonna take 40 minutes. I'm just really realistic with people up front. All of this stuff gets ironed out before, so that when we actually do see them and we talk to them the day of, there isn't any stress on them. I don't have to ask them anything. I don't have to ask where we go for any reason. And that just takes off the pressure from the bride or the groom or the couple, so that they are not worried about anything and they're not second guessing what I'm doing. That is a huge tip. Take that with you, run with it. Always have a detailed schedule. The last thing I'll say about connecting is you never want to go into a wedding thinking like, this is just another wedding. Every single wedding is so different. Like, I know that a lot of photographers are like, I got this. It's just another wedding. I can go in and just shoot it. We all know what's going to happen at every wedding. But I think that once you open up your mind and realize that every single person has their own life story, their own scenario, some set of circumstances that made their situation different, then you're going to realize that you have an insight to them, and that's going to allow you to take images that are just so much more meaningful to them. Here's an example of how we connect with our client. The bride had a farm that she grew up on, so she invited us to do all the photos there that day. And luckily we had some really beautiful sunlight. I just love exploring different pockets of light and really having fun with the couple before the wedding day. It allows us to kind of just get in there, talk with them, get to know them, sort of see how they photograph. If we are able to create really dynamic, different, colorful, interesting images for them, then as soon as they see them, they are just filled with trust for the day of the wedding. I can't tell you how many times we've walked into the formal situation at the actual wedding and they're like, wow, well, we just trust you. Whatever you want to do, let's just do it because we love our engagement photos. So here we have, one shot that was shot from above with a drone. What's so cool about this property and these shots to me is that this is actually where the bride grew up. So it's really meaningful to her. We're out in the pond and we're here with the goats. I don't know, it's just a way that allows us all to kind of get to know the family, as well as like just building that trust and foundation for the day. So step 2 would be communication. And when I say this, I mean communicating your process and your approach to your client beforehand and during the wedding. When I arrive to a wedding, the first thing that I do is I go right up to whoever I'm photographing in that room, whether it be the bride or the groom or whoever. And usually all the girls are sitting around, and I say hello to everybody. I put my gear down, I walk in like a normal human being without all the stuff, and I say hello to everybody, and I'm like, hey, I'm Jen. At that moment, I am not the photographer. I am just another person that's here to hang out with you. Right away, I'm kind of setting the tone for the fact that I'm not there to like boss everybody around or control the situation or make you feel uncomfortable. I'm just there to have a good time with you and to add to the day. At that point, I go right up to the bride, I say hello, I'm like, do you need anything from me? Before I start, I address any issues. If there's like any communication breakdown beforehand, or if there's a question of weather, for some reason all of a sudden there's a monsoon outside, I'm like, okay, listen, this is the deal. We need to talk about this, and I want to get it out of the way before everything really starts to get crazy, so that they can just have fun and relax. At that point, I'm always going right into the details. I do this for a couple of reasons. One, I want to get them out of the way. I don't mind details, I don't hate them, but I usually like them more if they're really meaningful. I'm not so much about the stuff, but I photograph it for them because I know it's important to them. Normally what I do is I try to not, and this sounds probably crazy, but I try not to talk to anyone or make eye contact with anyone while I'm doing this. And the reason I do this is because I want them to get used to my camera, get used to me not paying attention to them. In turn, what happens is they start to ignore me and they start to just do what they normally would do, and they don't even notice me after a while. You could see how that could start to play into the rest of the day. If you were to do the reverse, if you started to just like talk with them and control things and be too involved, immediately they recognize you as like the boss for the day. As much as that sounds great, you really just want to be an observer as much as possible. That's the kind of like the way that I set the tone for the beginning of the day, is by doing that first. And then after I'm done with the details, I'm looking around the room, I'm looking for light, I'm looking for composition, I'm looking for color, I'm looking for textures, I'm looking for things that tell the story of the couple that I'm photographing that day and ways to incorporate them. And I'm also thinking in the back of my head, like, where's a good spot for her to get dressed? And I don't necessarily always tell them what to do unless they want to get dressed in a corner that has, no windows or something like that. I'm not really telling them too much, but a lot of times if I just kind of like direct them toward the light, it'll happen. So we're always kind of scoping out like what's the best spots in the room when we get there. In the beginning of the day, I really try not to pose anything. Because like I said before, this just plays into the whole tone of me being the boss. And so I'm kind of like training them in the beginning. And if I don't train them, then it becomes like, where do we go? What do we do? How do I hold his hand? How do we walk? Who walks me down the aisle? Does my dad walk me down the aisle? Like, I just want them to do what they do. And so I've learned from my mistakes in the past that if you control too much in the beginning of the wedding day, that plays out throughout the rest of the day. So you really, I can't stress it enough, you really want to set that tone right in the beginning of the day. And the last thing I'll say about the prep area and kind of communication and everything is, if there's drama going on in the room, just try to stay out of it and have your bride's back. No matter what's happening, have your bride's back. Give her a shoulder for a second if you need to. This will just build more trust with her. But I advise you not to get too caught up in anything that's going on, and just try to be cool and calm and be there for her. That will do wonders for your reputation, and it'll get you hired repeatedly, and you'll end up getting great pictures in the end too. So step 3 is be decisive. You have to remember always that they hired you for your eye, but at the end of the day, you do work for them. There are going to be a ton of situations that you walk into where you are like, wow, this location's so epic, it's going to be amazing. And then you get there and it's 105 degrees and everybody's miserable and nobody wants to walk even 300 feet. You have to be willing to sacrifice what you had in your head for their experience. Because our job is to make amazing photos and to push them a little, but it's also to be flexible and be able to make great images even in like maybe not the best situation. And recently this happened to me a couple weeks ago even. I was photographing the bride and groom and somebody came up to me while I was photographing them and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "That's gonna look terrible." And I kind of looked over, I was like, okay, well, thank you. And then come to find out a couple minutes later, that was the groom's father. So had I reacted in like a much worse way, that could have turned out pretty bad for the rest of the day for everybody. So I just think it's a lesson of like just trying to go with the flow and be cool about things. Things are not gonna always work out. Just go in with a clear head and always have a backup plan in your head. If they say that they don't wanna walk 300 feet, don't make them walk 300 feet. Just make amazing photos right there. I do tend to walk into a situation with, for formals especially, where I'll look around in a circle and just go, okay, like we've got a lot of different angles from here. All you have to do, you could stay in one spot and make amazing photos. You know, you don't have to go to 5 different locations across the city just because there's a monument there. I think, and that goes back again to the communication in the beginning and your approach and talking about that with the client. If you tell them like, listen, we can make, or even just show them an example, say, we made these photos in this scenario and it was within, 1 city block and we had 20 minutes. They're gonna go, okay, great. Then I don't wanna make my grandmother walk 500 feet to the family photo location or whatever it is. They're gonna trust you, and there are always gonna be people that are second guessing you. You have to hold your ground, but you still have to be assertive without being rude, if that makes sense. It's hard, it's a really hard thing to do, but again, it's like one of those things I've kind of mastered over the years, is like just smile through it and just go, okay, we got this, we got this. Because, sometimes it's weird, you'll end up with worst location, and it'll end up being absolutely amazingly beautiful on paper. So just trust your gut, go with it, and don't let everybody else's comments or whatever kind of throw you off. Last step is storytelling. I think this is probably the most important step. All the other steps lead up to this one being the most important. So if you have all that other stuff done that we just talked about, and all of that is kind of like figured out, then you can just do an amazing job of storytelling. I think that in the beginning of when I first started out, I used to kind of try to control a lot of the situations because I thought I needed to. I thought that's what made me a really great photographer. I thought that if I was constantly telling everybody what to do and where to be, that, you know, I was making these awesome portraits, but I wasn't thinking about all of the little tiny, sensitive, emotional moments in between that mean so much more to the people that you're telling the story about. You know, now I really try to focus on these little tiny moments between people. And one that actually kind of made me choke up a couple weeks ago was between a mom and her daughter. And I know that going in that they did not have the best relationship. And when the bride got dressed, the mom just got so emotional. They in turn both got emotional, and it was just like this beautiful moment together. And what is the secret to taking these kind of photos? Other than what I just said, it's definitely hunting and sitting and waiting and being patient. If you have to crouch down in the same spot, you found a really cool spot, you found your composition, you can see 3 or 4 people in the composition that are all kind of like interacting, and you know it's about to be a great moment, don't move. Just sit there and wait and keep taking pictures until you get it. And you might not. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've sat there and waited and waited and waited and nothing happened. And it's sad. I have like a little when it happens, but the best thing is, or the worst thing I should say, is when you get up right as it happens. You're sitting there for 10 minutes, your legs start cramping up, you start sweating, and then you get up and everything starts happening. That's my worst nightmare. So you want to make sure that you're just trying to be as patient as possible to really make sure you get that moment for them. I am always constantly looking around the room to see if I can incorporate something that's meaningful into the photo. So if it's just a bride getting ready, I'm going to maybe try to find a picture of her when she was younger to do some sort of creative photo in. Or if her mom and her grandmother are around, I'm going to try to incorporate them in the photo. I'm always looking for things that are going to layer the photo and give it that much more meaning. If you can master beautiful portraiture, you're great. But if you can master the storytelling of the emotional moments as well and really capture them well, then you're unstoppable. I encourage you guys to go out there and look at other people's work that is, you know, street photographers. You check out Vivian Meyer, she's absolutely amazing. She's from like the 20s. She just photographed people on the street, and it sounds crazy, but it just caught emotional moments between people. And I think that if you can hone in on that, that's the secret to why people will continue to hire you. Storytelling is single-handedly the most important part of our job, in my opinion. It's not about the awards. It's not about the, you know, accolades that we get from other photographers. It's not about our Photoshop skills or like our hipster moneymaker. It's not about any of the dumb stuff. It's definitely about telling stories between people and their families. We are creators of heirlooms for these people. They're gonna have something that they have for the rest of their life to show their children. When you think about the photos that you have from when you're a kid, you're not thinking about like, oh, look at the Photoshop skills on that. That's not what tugs at your heart. What tugs at your heart is the emotion behind it. You remember that moment when your dad was so much taller than you and you were just a little tiny kid and you just got your first bike and you're looking up at him. That's the kind of moment that you want to capture, but we have the luxury of being really technically talented at using our cameras. If you can combine the two, then you've got gold with your client every time. And also, it's so much more fulfilling as a wedding photographer to know that you're doing something that actually matters and that's actually gonna make an impression on the rest of their life.